Hello everyone, this is the second PSTAR video, the English version of course. I'm having some camera issues today, resolution's worse, there's like black boxes sometimes around my screen. I'm trying my best. Um, although, forgive me for this, software is bugging out on me, I'm doing what I can. So, I expect all those who watched this video to have seen the previous one. I'm not gonna spend too much time on this. Let's just get straight into what's going on for today. Hello. So here's the lesson plan for the day. We're going to be talking about aerodromes, equipment, pilot responsibilities, wake turbulence, and aeromedical. I said I might be able to get through all five. I got through all five. Hopefully it won't be too long. The French video is a bit longer, 52 minutes. But the French video is always a bit longer because it's my first go, and this is often my second go. So let's get straight into this. Aerodromes. So what's an aerodrome? An aerodrome is basically any body of water or land that or ground, I suppose, that you can land on. Um, if your friend has a farm, the back of that farm can be an aerodrome if you want, just to land wherever. This includes about 99% of Canada. An aerodrome also includes the installations. When we say aerodrome, it includes not just the runway, but the buildings around it, if it's related to the runway, if it is even a runway and not just like a piece of ground. Cool. What is a registered aerodrome? So a registered aerodrome is an aerodrome that has been inspected for safety, and it's published in the CFS. The CFS, we've spoken about it a couple times so far, the little blue book with all the airports and aerodromes. It doesn't have all of them. It has all the registered aerodromes and certified aerodromes. Um, yeah, it's inspected for safety to see if it's vaguely viable and not just like a piece of land. And lastly, a certified aerodrome. This is also just called an airport. That's what an airport is. A certified aerodrome has all the necessary standards to be an airport, and this includes, for example, fire trucks, a control tower, runway lights, the grass to be cut at a certain height. You need all of these factors and more to be considered a certified aerodrome, and then you become an airport. In the CFS, there's the word certified next to it. Well, cert. So, for example, Saint-Hubert, Saint-Jean, Montreal, Mirabel, all airports. Um, Sorel, Drummondville, Salaberry de Valleyfield, I, Bromont. Those are all aerodromes, or registered aerodromes in this case. Cool. Um, so let's talk about operating it at an aerodrome. So to operate a car or whatnot at an aerodrome, you need permission from the owner. Some places have like clubs, but some don't. You just need the permission from the owner to be able to drive a car around an aerodrome. And if you're flying at an aerodrome or above an aerodrome, you need to be flying 2,000 feet or above if it's not for takeoff or landing reasons. Great. So, what is a maneuvering area? A maneuvering area is any area that's made for taxiing, takeoff, or landing. Basically, where the plane is, except for when it's parking or refueling. Or I think that's it. I guess maintenance. Taxi, takeoff, and landing is what. I'm sorry, maneuvering area is. Um, Now let's see some runway markings. Runway numbers. Let's say we have a runway that faces this direction. I suppose. Imagine like you're on a map and you're looking top down. So this runway is looking east-west, right? We can see this. This section, this bit of the runway here is pointing this direction, so it's pointing towards 270 degrees. Remember, 0 degrees, 90 degrees, 180, 270, all this, right? So this bit of the runway is pointing towards 270 degrees. This bit of the runway is pointing towards 90 degrees. Okay, that makes sense. So this bit of the runway, this pointing, whatever, this bit of the runway is pointing towards 270 degrees, and to what, there's a number on that runway. The way we find this number, we take 270 degrees, you remove the last zero, and that's it, 27, right? So this is a runway 27, and on the other side, it's pointing towards 90 degrees. You, in this case, remove the last zero and then add one at the beginning, so it's always two numbers. So this is runway 27 and runway 09. That makes sense? Am I? Yeah, yeah. This is backwards on my screen, so it's a bit annoying to figure out. It's runway 27 and runway 09. For your information, in the U.S., they don't always put the zero in front of numbers. They could just say runway 9. I find that weird. I always like having two numbers, just makes it more clear for me. If a runway is closed, there's a large white X on it. So I've seen images of yellow X's for some reason. Generally, it's white X for a closed runway and a yellow X for a closed taxiway. I wrote down that it can be either or, but it's generally white for runway, yellow for taxiway. And if you see a solid line on your way to the runway, that's a hold short line. I don't know how many of you drive or pay attention to your parents when you drive, but it's like in the middle of the road, you have the dotted lines. You can cross the dotted line. If it's a solid line, you cannot cross the solid line. Similar thing. If it's a solid line, you cannot cross it. You have to hold short and wait until you have authorization to cross. If there is no line and you must hold short for whatever reason, you must hold short 200 feet from the edge of the runway. Let's look at what these look like. So on the top, on here, you see a closed runway, the big yellow X. Again, generally it's white. I think it differs from country to country. In Canada, it's a white X, but it looks similar. I go on Google Maps right now and go at the Montreal airport. I think the one of the runways is closed at the moment, and I think another one is closed on the Saint Hubert airport. So if you look, you might be able to see a big X on a runway. That and down here is the lines I was telling you about, the solid lines and the dotted lines. So this is actually the solid line is facing a taxiway and the dotted lines are facing a runway. So when you're on a runway, you can go through no problem, but if you're on a taxiway, you have to wait to have authorization to go on to the runway because otherwise you're holding short. Here we have a windsock actually, or a wind cone, and I'm going to show you guys how to read one. It's honestly very simple. The windsock changes in the direction of the wind. That should be pretty self-evident, I feel. And then for it also tells you the strength of the wind, but it's not just like it's going hard or soft. It tells you actual numbers. A windsock is separated into 5 sections, as you can see here: red, white, red. Or if sometimes it's orange or sometimes it's like blue. 90% of the time, red or orange. And each section that's horizontal actually corresponds to 5 knots of wind. Sorry, to 3 knots. Sorry, 3 knots of wind. So you're able to deduce that, right? So if it's all out, that's 3 times 5. That's 15 knots of wind. If it's just three of them out, that's 3 times 3, 9 knots of wind. If you don't see the cone, it has been stolen. They are pretty resistant to wind. They can last up to like 75 knots, I think. So they should not be falling off. Those are going to here in miles an hour, kilometers an hour, meters per second. I think there's a mistake in the meters per second here. I don't know why it would go from 6 meters per second to 1.5. I think what they meant to say is 7.5, and they just put 1.5 for some reason. Whatever. Um, the one thing with the windsock is it will not let you know speeds above 15 knots. It can be 16 knots or 35. It'll just be horizontal. So keep that in mind. Let's see questions immediately. So, except for the purpose of taking off or landing, an aircraft shall not be flown over an aerodrome at a height of less than, in this case, it's 2,000 feet, 1,500, 1,000 feet, or 500 feet. We saw it. It's 2,000 feet AGL. Remember, AGL is at ground level. A dry transport Canada standard wind direction indicator, a windsock, when horizontal, indicates a wind speed of at least, so we saw it, 5 sections, 3 knots per section, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. So it's at least 15 knots. So in this case, answer number 2. The west end of a runway oriented east-west is numbered. So, like I said, for you guys, west-east. So the west end is pointed towards here. This is so 0, 9. In this case, the answer is number 1, 0, 9. An airport is an aerodrome with paved runways, an aerodrome with a control tower, an uncertified aerodrome, or a certified aerodrome. So, with paved runways, let's start off with that. Does not make sense. A lot of aerodromes have paved runways, and does not have to be an airport for that. Sorel is one of the worst airports I've been to, aerodromes I've been to, and has a paved runway. I hate on Sorel a lot, guys. I'm not hating on Sorel. It's just it was a very I was very used to seeing very pretty aerodromes, and then I go to Sorel and there's it's like cracks in the runway and grass, and it's a sketchy place. I'm not hating too much. I think it's just not for me. An aerodrome with a control tower. So that's Close, because most airports have control towers. It's not a necessity. It's not a necessity. How do I put this? Not all control towers mean are in an aerodrome or in an airport. Sorry, you could have an aerodrome with a control tower, and if it doesn't have all the other prerequisites, it's not an airport. So that one's not true. Now, uncertified aerodrome, that's just untrue. The last answer would be a certified aerodrome is what an airport is. Fantastic. Let's continue. So here's the necessary equipment. There's acronyms to be made. Some acronyms that I've seen. The one I learned when I took this course was let me get it here. It was AROWJIL, or the or for the TAMA I made, some put move factor. That one's there's way too much information on that. That's not necessarily true. Um, I I guess changed myself a tiny bit. My instructor this summer taught me CP Rail, and I think it's a lot better. Um, so let's just get on with this. C is for crew licenses. That I have, for example, a radio license and a private pilot license. If I go flying, I need to have my radio license and private pilot license with me. If I go with a friend who's also flying, that friend also needs their radio license or whatever licenses they have with them. P stands for POH, or the POH is the pilot operator handbook. Uh, in your parents' cars, if in the glove box, if you open it up, you'll notice there's like a little book for the car, and it'll say all the things that the car needs or like what each problem means. That's what a POH is essentially for the plane. Each plane has their own specific one, so you need that for flying. Or aircraft flight manual, very similar thing. So either or. You need the registration certificate. So the registration we saw it. It's the um like the tail number essentially. In Canada, it's all letters. So you need that certificate that that plane belongs to that number. You need the airworthiness certificate, so that just means this plane is good to fly legally and can fly. You need the insurance. You need insurance for the car. You need insurance for the plane. And lastly, you need the logbook when it's planned. The aircraft will land and shut down at any other location than the point of departure. Um, it's logbook or journey log. No, never mind. Am I wrong? I feel like I'm wrong here. It's a logbook if you are landing somewhere else. Um, and for the necessary equipment for day VFR flight. So VFR flight, I haven't been seeing this with you guys very often, but I hope those who are taking the class know what VFR flight is at this point. A VFR flight is basically a flight where you can see outside the window, and this is what guides you. Um, your main instrument, your main thing that you're referring yourself with is outside. So the necessary equipment to fly during the day, where you are mainly looking outside and don't have like equipment to fly with just your instruments, would be a timepiece, so a watch or whatever, an airspeed indicator, a magnetic direction indicating system or magnetic compass, so a compass, and altimeter. I put Tama. You can put Amt, Mata, whatever. You can. There's 4 letters. I just chose Tama because it makes sense to me. That's all you really need, right? For those who are actually, I'll get to the specifics of this when we get to the question. So for now, just know timepiece, airspeed indicator, magnetic direction indicating system or magnetic compass, and altimeter. So here's the rest of the equipment you might need in certain situations, right? You need if we're 25 nautical miles from the point of departure. Emergency equipment that includes. You don't actually need to know what the emergency equipment includes specifically for the PSTAR, but it's like basically what we're bringing in survival, right? Axes, a med kit, a um, tent. Sometimes that depends on the situation, but you need emergency equipment, which is at the very minimum. If you're going 25 miles from the airport, I'm gonna be restating this here. The emergency frequency is 121.5 megahertz. You need to know this. Everyone needs to know this. It's a mandatory thing to know. The international emergency frequency is 121.5 megahertz. Now, if you're taking off or landing on water, what you need to know is that you need one approved life preserver per person. Not life vest, life preserver. There's a difference. A life vest is basically just what you wear in a pool, so it'll keep you floating. But a life preserver keeps your head floating. So if you're unconscious, you can still live. That distinction is important. Life preserver. I actually argued with my Transport Canada exams my teachers and everything because they said, "Oh well, you need a life vest." Like at some point, one of the answers was they needed a life vest, and I had to argue that it was a life preserver because life vest is not sufficient, and I was right. You need a life preserver. Now I forgot to put night flight for night flight. Uh, it's kind of funny. You need a serviceable nightlight if you have passengers and you're landing at night, but not if you're alone. Who cares if you're the pilot, right? You need a nightlight if you're with passengers. No way. And if you must land at an illuminated aerodrome, so an aerodrome with light. Now, for supplementary oxygen, we're gonna get to hypoxia pretty soon, but essentially, if you're too high up, you don't have enough oxygen in the air to breathe, and then you don't die of being asphyxiated necessarily. What happens first is that the air doesn't go to your brain, and then you start being very stupid, and then you die. So, if you're between 10,000 feet and 13,000 feet ASL, ASL, remember, is at sea level, so not from where the ground is, from where the sea is. If you're more than 30 minutes, you need oxygen for the entire time of that 30 minutes. So if you're staying 31 minutes, you don't need 1 minute of oxygen. You need 31 minutes of oxygen, if that makes sense. You can stay 28 minutes without oxygen, but if you need 31 minutes of oxygen. And if you're at 13,000 feet, you must have oxygen with you. There's not enough oxygen in the air to survive if you're higher than 13,000 feet. Fantastic. For those who are wondering, in commercial planes, that's not an issue. The plane is pressurized and is given oxygen throughout the flight. We're talking about different. So an infant passenger, you need to know this. An infant passenger is a child younger than 2 years old, and if you need to, the way to hold an infant passenger is you don't put a seatbelt around the infant. The infant is held securely in the arms of a person who has their own seatbelt on them. Um, it's in the PSTAR. You need to know it. I don't know why, but I'm putting this down for you guys. See, let's go straight into some sample questions. So the international VFR emergency frequency is 121.5 megahertz. I'm not even going to go through the options. The answer is 121.5 megahertz. Down here, no person shall fly an unpressurized aircraft for more than X minutes at an altitude between 10 and 13,000 feet ASL, unless there is readily available to each flight crew member. Oh, sorry, what? Oh, of whatever. It's worded different weirdly. You get what the question is. It's asking how long can you be between 10,000 and 13,000 feet without supplemental oxygen? We saw it. The answer is 30 minutes. I'm not going to go through the options. There's one good answer. 30 minutes. You have to know it. Under me, how here. Which flight instrument systems and equipment are required on power-driven aircraft flight? A magnetic direction indicating system or magnetic compass, and so remember that we had four letters, right? T, A, M, A. So T was timepiece, altitude, altimeter, magnetic compass, and airspeed indicator. We already have the magnetic compass down, so we only need three letters left. In the options here, this is really easy. We have two options with two letters, but let's. Well, I'm just showing you guys how I would do this question. There's two options with three letters, so that gives it's either one or two. Um, One big difference between the two I'm seeing it's F versus G, right? I know there's C and B, but let's just look at F real quick. So F is a timepiece. Cool, we win. A is the answer because you know that you need a timepiece, altimeter, magnetic compass, and airspeed indicator. So in this case, I just saw timepiece, and that's all I need. But if you want to really go through it, option one has an airspeed indicator and a timepiece along with a magnetic direction indicator already stated in the question. Great. Not what I wanted to do. Except for ultralight airplanes and balloons, which documents shall be carried on board when flying a radio-equipped Canadian privately registered aircraft? Items A, B, and which ones? So remember that we said it was CP rail, CPRA. So that's six letters. We already have two down. So all our answers have four letters. That we can't narrow any down just from that. That's fine. Whatever. Um, we say A and B, right? So that's the flight authority, so the airworthiness, and the registration. So that already takes off the A and the R of CP rail. Okay, so that leaves us the C, the P, the I, the L. So what was C? C, we said, was the what did I put CS? I had to make up the acronym. Crew licenses. Sorry, I'm so sorry. Got confused there. Crew licenses. Sorry. In this case, we see that's the letter D. So all of the options have D. That does narrow it down for us. What is the P? The P was the POH, or aircraft flight manual. So that's letter E. That narrows it down to not number two. So we know it's not number two now. We had the R already. We had the A already. The I. The I was the insurance. So proof of liability insurance. That's H. So that leaves us 2 and 4, right? No, sorry, that just leaves us 4. So that's the answer. 4. Let's go to the L though, just to make sure. The logbook, aircraft journey logbook. So that's G. So 4 has D, E, G, and H. Fantastic. I'll be honest with you guys. When I do this exam, I don't look for D, G. Like I don't look for all the answers. I just remembered that the answer is always D, E, G, H. Dig, Ash, whatever. Um, the answers in the PSTAR are always the same. They can be in different order. It won't always be answer number 4, but it'll always be D, G, H. So remember that if you really want to. It won't be the same for the exam. I must stress this. Fantastic. So let's see some pilot responsibilities. So the PIC, the PIC, refers to the pilot in command. Safety is always the PIC's responsibility. 24 all the time. It is never not his responsibility. There's this joke I always make that if it stinks in the control tower, it's the pilot's fault. You know what I mean? Um, it's always the pilot's fault. So let's see for the weather. The PIC must be familiar with all relevant weather info. This means if there's clouds coming in and you're flying and you're like, oh, well, I didn't see the clouds. I didn't see it was going to rain today. I didn't see there was going to have thunder. It's not a, oh, well, too bad. It's a, that was your job and you have failed as your job as a pilot. Your job is to make sure and know all of this information. In VFR, it's the pilot's responsibility to stay VFR, and I'll expand upon this by saying, if there are clouds or low visibility area or whatever it might be, it's the pilot's job to avoid it. If you plan your flight to fly straight line at 8,000 feet from point A to point B, and it turns out there's clouds at 8,000 feet, you're not just going to be like, oh well, I guess there's clouds now, but I'm going to keep going forward. No, your job is to get under those clouds and to stay VFR and to see the ground. Let's talk about takeoff. So the PIC must make sure the runway is long enough, even at an intersection. What that means is that sometimes if this, let's say this is the runway, the taxiway comes out here sometimes. Let's say you're waiting to taxi onto the runway. The controller might not want to make you go all the way back. Thank you. Oh, the dog's back. Got some cookies. On the dog show. Oh, and she. People in the French video saw her, so I Coco. I feel it's unfair if we don't show her to you guys. Little doggy. She stinks really bad. Like she stinks so bad. Oh, she fell on my headphone. I'm sorry, Coco. That's my bad. Sorry. Okay. She's shaking it off. Where was I? I'm so sorry. Let's say there's a runway and there's a taxiway here. Ordinarily, the pilot would taxi and then go all the way to one end of the runway and then take off. But for whatever reason, that might be too long for the air traffic controllers, and they might want you to take off as soon as you can. So they might say, can you take off at the intersection? That means you just show up on the runway and then take off. It is your job to know how long that is and to see if that's long enough for you. The air traffic controller normally says the length of the runway remaining. When I do it, they would say like 2,300 feet remaining. Is that okay for you? Or I just said a number, you know. And then I say yes. But even if they don't say it, that's my job to know how long the runway is at each intersection. If a heavy plane overflies the runway, let's say runway over heavy plane, whatever, the PIC must refuse takeoff and tell ATC why. We're going to get into this, but it has to do with wake turbulence. So we'll see this in a couple slides. Now let's see more pilot responsibilities. The transponder. The transponder is basically this little box in the plane that tells people where you are. It's kind of like a GPS type thing. I'm simplifying it a bit, but normally ATC gives you what number to put into there to make it yours, right? But if you're departing from somewhere with no ATC and that tells them what number to put in, If you're under 12,500 feet, actually at or below, you put 1200 into your transponder. And if you're above 12,500, you put 1400. Once again, unless ATC tells you a number to put in, then you put that number in. It is really important to know at or below. In my TC exam, there was a question like, what number do you put in if you're flying at 12,500 feet? And it's like, oh my god, man. Like, I don't know. Yeah, I forgot if it's which one's below, but it's at or below 12,500 is 1200, and above is 1400. The transponder also has this little button called ident. When you push that, it basically just your plane on the screen for the air traffic controllers, like on the screen where you are. Um, Only press it when asked. Otherwise, it does nothing. Generally, if I'm landing, coming to land at an airport, they'll say like Alpha the Foxtrot, FG. What's that in English again? What do they say in English? Squawk ident and say intentions. And so I'll press the ident button and I'll say Tower coming in for a full stop landing. It's just so they know where I am on the screen. So circuits. Quickly before I continue with you guys what a circuit is for those who don't know. So in this case we have the runway 03 and 12. Sorry, 21. The wind is coming towards 03, so from 30 degrees. When you take off, how do I put this? A circuit is a way to just fly into the airport, or a way to just practice, right? This summer I did hundreds of circuits to practice takeoffs and landings. And if you're coming in to land, let's say I want to land on runway 03, I can't just come in however I want. I have to come in into the specific way. It's kind of like having the driveway for your parents' car. You can't just get into the garage. You have to get up the driveway. Of course, in the driveway, it's a straight line, but imagine you have like a weird driveway. So, similar thing. Um, when you take off, it's for, I've heard multiple ways. Upwind leg, takeoff leg, it's weird. You have the crosswind leg, downwind leg, base leg, and final. Just you guys have to learn these. So, circuits. When you're cleared to a circuit, um, that means you are cleared to join downwind. You cannot join base or final. You must join downwind. Once again, if I'm moving back to here, that means you must get in on downwind. Not necessarily at the beginning of downwind, but you must get in on downwind, unless cleared otherwise. In a left-hand circuit, you may turn right to enter crosswind or mid downwind. So let's say they say cleared a circuit through and joining crosswind, I suppose. Imagine you're coming in where the word circuit is. You could turn right to get into the crosswind leg. And let I guess more like this corner of the screen, you're coming from there. You could turn right to get into mid downwind. Mid downwind is in the middle of downwind. Hope that makes sense. A Nordo plane may overfly the airport at 500 feet to get some useful information. What is a Nordo? No radio. That's all that means. NORDO. No radio. They don't have the information necessary, right? For whatever reason, sometimes the circuit. Oh, sorry. Sometimes the circuit direction switches from left hand to right hand, and if they don't have a radio, they have no way of knowing why that is or if that is the case. So a Nordo could fly over the airport, 500 feet, to see. Okay, people are landing. They're doing left-hand circuits. There's a lot of people right now. Maybe I could wait to land. If there's nobody right now, maybe I can see the runway is a bit on the runway, whatever it might be. They can't communicate, so they need to see what's happening. So they can fly 500 feet above the runway. Normally, circuit altitude is 1,000 feet AGL. So once again, AGL at ground level. So let's say the airport is at 300 feet ASL. You'd be flying at 1,300 feet ASL if you're doing the circuit. So in a controlled aerodrome, let's say there's clouds, like in the example I said, where you're supposed to be flying at 1,300 feet. Let's say there's clouds at 1,300. Where do you fly now, right? Because you can't, you're not allowed to. What do? In a controlled aerodrome, you can stay you must stay 500 feet below the cloud base. So in this case, you would be flying at 800 feet ASL. And that's just 500 feet over the runway, but that's important. You need that distance. And in an uncontrolled aerodrome, you must stay out of the clouds. I want to make sure I got that right. I got it wrong yesterday. Yeah, I was right. It's clear of clouds if they're under 1,000 feet AGL. I hope that makes sense. We saw the circuit here. I showed you guys what each thing means. I hope this makes a lot of sense. You should also know the terms for these: crosswind, downwind, base, and final. Takeoff leg. I've never had to, or rarely had to talk about it. So some say, I said it earlier, upwind leg, takeoff leg, whatever. Let's see some sample questions. So, when the reported ceiling is 1,000 feet overcast and visibility is 3 miles to remain VFR, an aircraft cleared to the circuit must join as high as possible without entering the cloud, 500 feet below the cloud base, 700 feet AGL, in accordance with special VFR. So, here's the thing. Some of you might be screaming, "Oh, special VFR! It says 1,000 feet and 3 miles." No. So, special VFR, the thing with special VFR is that you must request special VFR. They cannot offer you special VFR. You must ask for it. For those who don't know special VFR, ignore this bit. It's to clear up some confusion for those who do know about special VFR. In this case, the question is: an aircraft cleared to the circuit must join, and you don't have to do special VFR. Special VFR is a request you can make. So it's not answer number 4, although it leads you to believe it is. Let's look at the 3 other answers: as high as possible without entering the cloud, up 500 feet below the cloud base, and 700 feet AGL. So 700 feet AGL comes from nothing, so let's ignore that one. It's completely useless. It's either as high as possible without entering cloud, or 500 feet below cloud. And some of you might be thinking, well, okay, well, how are we supposed to know if it's controlled or uncontrolled? Because it doesn't say it in the question, and that depends. That would change the answer. You have to read the words in this case. An aircraft cleared to the circuit must join. When you're cleared, that means you've been controlled. There's a tower that told you that you're cleared. So the answer in this case would be 500 feet below the cloud base, number 2. Let's go down here. An aircraft is cleared to the circuit where a left-hand circuit is in effect. Without further approval from ATC, a right turn may be made to join the final leg, join the base leg, join crosswind and a partial right turn. Join crosswind or a partial right turn to join the downwind leg, and descend on the downwind leg. We saw it earlier. There's no other. I'm not gonna go around it. It's number 3. Join crosswind or a partial right turn to join the downwind leg. Let's see under me here. When an arriving aircraft is cleared to the circuit, a pilot should interpret this to mean to join the circuit on the downwind leg at circuit height, from the upwind side of the runway in all cases, on the base leg of convenient, on final for straight in approach. The answer in this case is on the downwind leg at circuit height. This doesn't mean you can never join on final, right? Let's say you're coming in from let's say you're 5 miles away from the runway, but you're perfectly in line with it. They're not going to just make you go back into the circuit for no reason. They'll just clear you on final. They will say, auf the Fahrstart, you can come in on long final for runway 03, right? If you're just told to join the circuit or clear to the circuit, that means downwind though. If cleared for takeoff immediately following the very low approach and overshoot of a large aircraft, the pilot should take off immediately, otherwise the trailing vortices will descend into the flight path. Taxi to position until it is considered safe to take off. Decline takeoff clearance and inform ATC of the reason of non-compliance. And wait for 2 minutes after the large aircraft passes, then take off. So I'm not going to go super into detail with it because that is our next point, I believe, after this next batch of questions that we're talking about wake turbulence. But basically, wake turbulence is after a huge plane, it creates a lot of turbulence, a lot of wind that can be very dangerous. That wind can stay a while on the runway. Answer 1, take off immediately, otherwise the trailing vortices will descend onto your flight path. That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Don't try to brush things, you're going to hurt yourself and die. 2, taxi to position on the runway and wait until it is considered. So that is not necessarily wrong, but what you want to do is inform ATC of what you're doing at all costs. Decline takeoff clearance and inform ATC of the reason of non-acceptance. That is a perfect answer. And 4, wait for 2 minutes after the large aircraft has passed, then take off. That's not necessarily untrue, but you're not the one to make that decision. You're the one to just decide, I'm not taking off now. Hey, ATC, I'm not taking off. Here's why. The 2 minutes, the 3 minutes, whatever it might be, 2 minutes might not even be enough, honestly. So it's not number 4, not number 3. Not number 4, not number 2. Definitely not 1, so it's number 3. I got some more questions here for you guys. terminal airspace dimensions and VHF sector frequencies for certain high-density traffic airports in Canada are shown. These are shown in the VTA and VNC charts. It's not in the CFS. It doesn't show the airspace dimensions. It's not in the VTA and the CFS. Are these answers different from the? Huh. I think their answers are different from the French one. It's not in the TCA. VTA and CFS, VTA VNC, and CFS and VNC. The answer is VTA and VNC. Sweet. Let's see down here. A pilot is cleared to land, but is concerned about high crosswind component. The pilot should use full flaps and approach at a reduced speed, alter heading and land on another runway which is more into wind, overshoot and request an into wind runway, continue the approach and land as the clearance must be obeyed. So let's go one by one here. Use full flaps and approach at reduced speed. Don't do that. You actually is the worst possible option when you're using full flaps and there's gusty winds and especially in a bad direction. You don't want that. It's not number one. 2. Alter heading and land on another runway which is more into wind. Let's keep that one in mind. It's not bad. There's a reason why it's not the answer. 3. Overshoot and request an into wind runway. For those who don't know, an overshoot is when you're coming to land and you don't feel like it and you just keep going. 4. Continue the approach and land as the clearance must be obeyed. So a clearance doesn't have to be obeyed. A clearance is you're cleared to do something. You can say, if I don't want this, finally. So number 4 makes no sense. You should not continue to approach if you're not comfortable with the crosswind component. Crosswind component, for those who don't know, is if you're coming into land and the wind isn't forwards, it's actually like to the side, and then you might be like having problems with your flying. So it's either 2 or 3. Alter heading and land on another runway which is more into wind, or overshoot and request an into wind runway. This depends on 2 things, or on 1 thing actually. Is the airport controlled? Because if and kind of where you want to land, more or less. If it is controlled, you must respect what they say. In this case, we say a pilot is cleared to land, which means it is a controlled airport, which means the answer is number 3. Overshoot and request an into wind runway. Let's check under me here. Unless ATC instructs otherwise, pilots operating VFR shall select transponder code 1200 when flying below X feet ASL and code X when flying above that altitude. The answer is 1200 when flying at or below 12,500 feet and code 1400 when flying above that altitude. There's nothing to be done. You gotta memorize this. A student pilot on a VFR flight has been given a radar vector by ATC. Ahead, at a lower altitude, is a solid overcast cloud condition. The pilot should 1. Climb above the cloud and fly a VFR over the top. 2. Alter heading as necessary to remain VFR and advise ATC. 3. Altitude as it is in ATC clearance. And 4. Maintain heading and altitude because ATC knows of the cloud and will issue further instructions. So, number 1 doesn't make any sense. VFR over the top is you need an extra license to do that, and you might not. It says a student pilot, so a student pilot definitely does not have the over the top rating. Not allowed. 4. Maintain heading and altitude because ATC knows of the cloud and will issue further instructions. Well, that's actually just not taking your pilot responsibilities into account. The responsibility of a pilot is to know the weather and to get out of that weather. You can't be saying, oh, well, it was ATC's job to tell me to not go in the weather. It is your job to not go into the weather, period. Alter heading is necessary to remain VFR and advise ATC, or maintain heading and altitude as it is an ATC clearance. As you mentioned earlier, ATC clearances are not mandatory. If for whatever reason you can't, especially for a safety reason, you don't have to. In this case, the good answer would be alter heading as necessary to remain VFR and advise ATC. Fantastic. Let's keep going. So what is wake turbulence? I don't have a plane with me to show off, unfortunately. Actually, I do. Give me a moment here. So, little plane. I forgot I had those. The plane here. Imagine it's way bigger and way heavier, of course. But when it flies, it creates lift. Switch to the slides just to show you with the image of here. The air passing here, when it creates lift, plane's pushed to the side, and creates vortices or vortex. Vortices is the plural of vortex, which is like spinning wind things. These can be very dangerous, and it's what I mentioned earlier. It can cause a lot of turbulence. Um, that's basically it. Let's get into the specifics of this. On the left of the plane, so for you guys here on the, oh, that's how to do this backwards. On the left of the plane, they go counterclockwise. Is this counterclockwise for you guys? Yes, it is. And on here, they go clockwise. So, yeah. Um, they're more intense when the plane is clean, which means no flaps out and no landing gear. Heavy and slow. Um, so the best situation, the most wake turbulence could be caused on an overshoot. When the plane is coming, let's say the bottom of the screen is one way. The plane is coming into land, it has its gear down, doesn't feel like landing anymore, brings its gear up, full power. It is heavy, still pretty slow, and it's clean. So that's gonna be the most wake turbulence. Um, what I really want to say is that it is not caused by these reactors here, by propellers or reactors or whatever it might be. It is entirely caused by lift. A paper airplane creates wake turbulence. Not very much, but it does create wake turbulence. So this only exists when lift is a thing, and it's most intense with rotation. For those who don't know, rotation is if I'm about to take off. This is rotation when I start taking off. Helicopters also create wake turbulence, and that one is affected by weight and size. You have to know this for the PSTAR. That's all you need to know. So, um, we can see the shape of the wake turbulence on the left here. On the right, not what I wanted to do. What I wanted to show is look, if you can see the touchdown and the rotation, right? When the plane is taking off, lift is happening right now because the air is going to the air. Immediately, the wake it happens. The wake turbulence exists. And as soon as it starts landing, ground there's normal lift to bring it into the air. It stops. It is as simple as that. When you're flying in the air, it comes out and behind you. As we imagine, it's my arm, right? We can kind of see it in the image here, but wake turbulence goes down and out. The reason it's important to know that it comes with lift is, let's say I want to land after a guy who just landed, right? He generates a lot of wake turbulence, and I know that if I land in that wake turbulence, my plane's gonna get all messed up. So what's nice to do, what you have to do, is land beyond the other plane. We're beyond where the other plane landed. So then you're not in all the wake turbulence. Does that make sense? Plane 1 lands here, bam. The wake turbulence is at this point, and now, sorry, all this is wake turbulence. So if I'm flying again, I want to land further out, so I don't get any of the wake turbulence. Same thing if when you're taking off. When you take off, wake turbulence starts here. So now if you want to take off, before, so you don't get into all this wake turbulence here. Fantastic. And lastly, what I want to mention is that wake turbulence can stay on runways for a very long time. Just a very slight amount of wind, or almost no wind, can keep wake turbulence, I guess, existing and keep the air moving for multiple minutes at a time. It can last up to like 5-6 minutes of just air moving around in very dangerous air. Fantastic. Let's keep going. Let's do some sample questions, and we have one more thing. We have air medical left, and we should be done. So, hazardous wake turbulence caused by an aircraft in still air. One, dissipates immediately, dissipates rapidly, may persist for 5 minutes or more, or persist indefinitely. So it's not indefinite. Nothing's indefinite, so forget that one. It does not dissipate immediately. As I just said, it can be pretty dangerous. It doesn't dissipate rapidly either. It actually may persist for 5 minutes or more. Great. What effect would a light crosswind have on wingtip vortices generated by a large aeroplane that has just taken off? A light crosswind could cause one vortex to remain over the runway at some time, would rapidly the strength of both vortices, would rapidly clear the runway of all vortices, or would not affect the lateral movement of the vortices. Like I mentioned, wind can just keep it in place, the vortex. I don't know why. It just is the case. It's just physics, fluid physics. So in this case, the answer would be number 1. Could cause one vortex to remain over the runway for some time. A pilot of a light aircraft on final approach close behind a heavier aircraft should plan the approach to land. So we saw this. Ideally, you'd want to land beyond the touch point. So in this case, it'd be answer number one, beyond the touch point of the other aircraft. Cool. Which statement concerning wingtip vortices is false? A. Vortices normally settle below and behind the aircraft. We saw that to be true. If this is flying, the wing vortices are down here. A light crosswind, with a light crosswind, sorry, one vortex can remain stationary over the ground for some time. We also saw that to be true. Lateral movement of vortices, even in a no wind condition, may place a vortex core over a parallel runway. That's entirely true. If you're taking off, if let's say there's 2 or 3 runways in a row, like next to each other, this one taking off does not save you. The vortex can move to the other runways. And lastly, vortices are caused by jet wash. This is the thing I mentioned to you guys earlier. Jet wash is just the air coming out of the propellers. That is not true. Vortices are caused by lift, not jet wash. Fantastic. Let's see some aeromedical here. So if you feel any ill for any reason as a crew member, do not fly. Period. It is not I'm gonna give my job to somebody else or I'm gonna it's you do not fly. Um, Ear injuries happen to people. People who've flown. You guys feel like your ears are gonna pop. Um, Ear injuries actually happen the most often in a descent. So to combat the ear injury, what you want to do is swallow, yawn, or the Valsalva maneuver. I'm not going to show you guys the Valsalva maneuver. You guys can look that up on your own. Just what you need to know is it happens more often in a descent, and you combat it with swallowing, yawning, or the Valsalva maneuver. So let's see some time restrictions. There are some things you can't do, or even a couple hours before flying. For example, drinking alcohol. You need 12 hours between drinking alcohol and flying, and the government recommends 24 hours if it was heavy drinking. Of course, this affects none of you yet, because A, none of you are pilots, and B, none of you can drink yet, I hope. Or none of you are drinking yet, I hope. Um, it's not even in the PSTAR, I'm just letting you know this because it's useful. 12 hours between drinking and flying. These are in the PSTAR, though. If you're going scuba diving with decompression stops, you must wait 24 hours before a flight. If you don't, your body does this thing from very high pressure to very low pressure, and you get this thing called the bends, where your skin inflates and you die. Not very fun, and you feel like everything's dizzy. If you gave blood, if you gave a blood sample or donated blood, you must wait 48 hours until the flight. Just to keep yourself awake and sane. Not sane, sorry, just awake, and healthy, I suppose. If you're given a local anesthetic, like at a dentist's office, they just numb your mouth, let's say, you must wait 24 hours before a flight. And if you're given a general anesthetic, you must wait until a doctor approves you to fly. I've had a general anesthetic before. I must let you know I was in no way positioned to fly the day after. Um, Fantastic. Let's continue here. Yeah. Hypoxia, I mentioned it earlier, is the condition in which you don't have enough blood getting to your brain. Uh, if you're experiencing any symptom of hypoxia or hyperventilation, the symptoms could be fatigue, could be aggressiveness, or being euphoric. They seem counterintuitive, but both can happen. What you must do is slow your breathing down to 12 times a minute. Hyperventilation can actually cause hypoxia because air isn't staying in your lungs long enough to get to your brain, to get into your blood. So they're both related. That's why. And you have to know that alcohol actually worsens hypoxia tolerance. So if let's say you were gonna get hypoxia at 13,000 feet, let's say you got drunk the day before or that day, you might get hypoxia at 8. So fatigue. So what you need to know for the PSTAR exam, there's this exact answer. It's fatigue slows reaction time and causes foolish, inattentive errors. I didn't write that. The PSTAR did. You need to know that. You need to rest correctly before you fly or whatever. This summer, I actually had to sign a contract that I would go to sleep at 9:30 and that I would eat breakfast every morning. Right? It's contractually, legally obligated to do both of these things because if I'm not attentive, if I'm tired, I will not be good. Um, you Cannot be taking any medication if you're planning to fly, unless you have advice from a medical examiner or that medication has been cleared for you previously. That's very important. Lastly, we're going to be talking about medical certificates. Uh, some of you, I hope, already have your medicals. If not, get them now. Um, this is like the Transport 3, the Category 3 Transport Canada medical certificate, just making sure you're fine to fly. If you're under 40 years old, this will last you 6 months before 60 months before expiring. If you're 40 or older, it lasts before expiring, and if you're 60 or older, it lasts 12 months before expiring. All you need for the PSTAR is the under 40 is 60 months, and 40 or over is 24 months. And let's see some last sample questions before we finish this. Um, let's see here. The Canadian medical certificate of a private pilot 40 years and over is valid in Canada for a period of, we just saw this, 24 months. Relatively small amounts of alcohol affect tolerance to hypoxia, lack of sufficient oxygen. This tolerance deteriorates with increase of altitude. That's what the answer is. I mentioned it a few seconds ago that alcohol makes it worse. So your tolerance deteriorates with altitude. Clearing the ears on a rapid descent may be assisted by swallowing, opening the mouth widely or yawning, a Valsalva maneuver, or all of the above. The answer is all of the above. With regard to fatigue, which statement is correct which statement is correct according to the information given under the medical information section of the TC AIM? Fatigue slow. I told you guys to look for the word foolish inattentive errors. Its answer. Fatigue slows reaction time, and causes foolish inattentive errors. You don't even need to look at the other ones. And the other ones don't even make sense. Financial or family problems do not influence tolerance to fatigue. A fatigued person recuperates more quickly as altitude is gained, and a fatigued person must have food immediately before and during a flight. All those don't make sense. Number two is the answer. So that's all we needed to see today with you guys. Um, Hopefully, I'll be getting the part 3 out in 2 or 3 days at most. I'll be telling you guys quickly what the next class is going to be. Hopefully, I'll be finishing by next class. Should be it. The next class we'll be talking about flight plans and itineraries. We'll be seeing clearances and instructions, aircraft operations, general airspace, controlled airspace, and aviation occurrences. Um, this section kind of gets a bit technical. I'll try to explain it as clearly as I possibly can, as usual. Um, for any questions, make sure to contact me, and I will be seeing you guys in the English video in 2 to 3 days.